Board and Board. I'm Luke.
And I'm Lars.
And this is two guys talking about every fantasy movie ever made. Lars, how are you doing? It has been a bit for this half.
It has been a bit for us in fantasy. And I got to be honest,
Yes.
Lucas, there's been a lot of fantasy that has happened in between us doing this. And it's had me have kind of an existential crisis about fantasy.
Continue.
I don't give two shits about the Rings of Power. I don't give two shits about the Wheel of Time. I'm ambivalent. I've been watching House of the Dragon, and it's fine. But I've begun to realize that high fantasy peaked for me with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Watching
Absolutely.
those films. And then everything else after that, it's kind of like they were the Dark Knight of superhero movies. It's ruined high fantasy for me afterwards. Does that make any sense? Like, I don't, and not in a bad way, but like just it's, I don't have that like, ooh, I need to watch this.
Well, those three, that trilogy was such an event, such a cultural,
it really was
cultural milestone, cultural thing. Like it hit the same level of Harry Potter and Star Wars and Star Trek.
And it brought so many different people together. I know nerds that love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I know jocks that love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Right? Like it hit. It was like you said. It was a cultural milestone. Like that was our kind of Star Wars experience. For our generation.
Absolutely. So before we get into the movie we're talking about, how are you doing? How are things besides your existential crisis?
About fantasy films, which calls into question what we're doing this whole podcast. I'm good, man. Elliot is a blue belt now in Taekwondo, so he is defending himself against weapons. Eleanor is in dance. Elizabeth and I are just. Actually, this is a fun thing. So, one of our dreams for a future, we would love to have a beach house, but we also would love to take the kids or just ourselves in retirement, rent an RV and go see the Grand Canyon, the Badlands, Rocky Mountains, the Yosemite, all that stuff. Just go in an RV. Well, I've never stayed in an RV before. So our goal, or in a couple of weeks, we're going out to an Airbnb that's an RV, and we've got a night out in the mountains just to go stay in an RV. It sounds trashy and silly, but it was one of those hey, if this is a dream of ours, I better go see if we really like it before we go, I don't want to go spend all this money and get in the RV the first night and realize, well, this fucking sucks.
This is the worst. This is the worst idea I've ever had.
The worst thing I've ever had in my entire life. So we're gonna go stay in a cool little mountain town in an RV. That's kind of the big thing that's coming up with us.
Speaking of you think something's trashy and weird, a couple of weeks ago we went to a new restaurant for the first time, Panda Express.
You've never been to a Panda Express?
Yeah, we'd never been where, and somehow we're like, all right, let's fucking try this. It was pretty good. We go to high-end restaurants, not high-end restaurants, but we go to new local restaurants all the time. But we were just sitting there thinking, have I ever been to a Panda Express? And we wanted Chinese food, so it worked out. It was good.
That's not bad. I find it weird to go to a Panda Express that's not in a mall. There's a standalone.
Yeah.
There's a standalone. I love the Bennigan's cup. You don't see too many Bennigans anymore.
Oh, I stole this in high school.
Oh, wow. You don't. Bennigan's was a thing for a long time. I remember going in Virginia when we were little. You don't see Bennigan's anymore.
No, I remember I got it from a field trip in high school. I stole it from Bennigan's in Boston.
But yeah, you see a
it's like a freestanding Chinese restaurant in general. Not even just Panda Express, but freestanding Chinese restaurants are very strange, and you have to be it can't be a purpose-built Chinese restaurant. It has to do the hermit crab thing and go into an older restaurant's.
Yeah, usually they're in strip malls.
Right.
The only
Or
freestanding Chinese restaurant that you typically see is a P.F. Chang's. That's
Yep.
the higher end.
Yeah, and there was one where we were living in Alabama that was nice. It was inside of an old Ruby Tuesdays. It wasn't in a mall; it was freestanding, but the Ruby Tuesdays went out of business, and it took it over like a hermit crab.
Mm.
And that was fine. But if they had built a Chinese restaurant somewhere, it would just seem alien. It would be like a cat on a leash.
Nice. Lucas, we're talking about all this stuff as opposed to talking about the movie. And why is that? Tell us what movie that we watched.
So we decided that with Rings of Power out right now, we should talk finally about the Lord of the Rings. Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. And Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings is a fascinating artifact because it's not precisely bad and it's not precisely good. And it's also the strangest animated film I may have ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
because there's like 4 different animation styles throughout the entire film, and it condenses 3 books, two and a half books down into 30 seconds almost. It has the opposite problem of the Hobbit movies. Mm-hmm. It's weird, but it follows Fellowship pretty well, and then it goes into Two Towers, and it spends maybe half an hour in Two Towers, and then it's done. And it was supposed to get a sequel, but it didn't get a sequel, so that's why we didn't get Return of the King. Sort of.
I was surprised at how faithful it was to Fellowship. Like,
yes.
There are scenes that, because I've seen Peter Jackson movies so many times, it was like, oh, no, this is pretty much there. You know, with the, I mean,
and
like in the Shire and into the, you know, the pub and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, Peter Jackson's movie expanded upon it, but it held pretty close to the source material, and with the same sort of things that they cut out, which I appreciate. There's no Tom Bombadil.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God.
Which is
because fuck that guy.
Yeah, I need to reread these, and I need to figure out what Tom Bombadil's deal is. But you bring up the Peter Jackson movie. We've brought it up a couple times because we're going to be continuously talking about it the whole time. Peter Jackson's a huge fan of this film, to the point where he used shots from this as storyboards for his movies. Specifically, like that pan shot of the party at the beginning when you've got the Proudfoot guy with his feet up on the ground on the table, or them hiding under the tree with the ringwraith trying to find them. Those were storyboards that Peter Jackson used because he loved those shots so much.
I did not know that, but I can now see, like, the ringwraiths in particular, them riding is very similar. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of crazy to me that it's basically 1.5 books, but that the other half of the book is one whole book condensed into a half of a book. Mm-hmm. It's nuts. When you, especially when you know, with Peter Jackson's, like, the Helm's Deep fight, that's basically half of Two Towers, right? Like that.
And it's been.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Years since I've seen it. No, I was just thinking about this when we were watching it. It's been years since I've seen the Peter Jackson movies, and I used to watch them all the time, and then I haven't watched them in about 10 years, I've realized. And I'm going to have to change that soon because they're incredible.
They really are. I am not a fan of the Hobbit movies because they expand too much. I wasn't a fan of this because it condensed too much now that I know what was going on in the Peter Jackson movies. Like the things that we missed. But they got a lot of the plot points. I was really surprised with this, that they got a lot of the stuff, at least for the Fellowship. The Two Towers
Yes.
they skimp over.
One of the things that's really fascinating to me is how different the. I wasn't expecting Gondor to look the Boromir, son of Gondor, to look like a Viking. I wasn't, no. There's so much leg in this movie. No one wears pants, and
They
it's
all wear
very,
skirts.
it's very.
They all
They all
wear
wear
skirts.
or yeah, skirts and long tunics, and it's very strange. And by strange, I mean it's just odd. I suppose it comes from. It's the 70s, and we don't know what a fantasy movie looks like yet. We still don't know what a fantasy movie looks like.
It still looks like Robin Hood.
Exactly. Thank you. That's what I was trying to. That was what I was going for.
But something I know, the thing that kind of took me out of the whole thing. I don't like rotoscoping. I don't like it.
You don't?
No,
Okay.
it is like it's weird. It looks like Tron, like bad Tron. It's just weird looking, and it just like was really unsettling for me. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what was. I feel like, and you mentioned this earlier, like the different animation styles. That was off-putting, to say the least, for me. What did you think?
Well, because it's not just there's not just the rotoscoping. I don't have a problem with with rotoscoped animation. It's the weird live action, oversaturated slash. There's a way I can't remember the name of the art style, and I should have looked that up. So I'm showing my ass here. There's a way you can develop film that gives people a thick black line around them, which is what animation looks like. So it gives it this weird pseudo animated style. And I wish that they had kept that to just the orcs and the evil side, because it would have highlighted the alien nature of it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But instead, you have the Riders of Rohan, who all look like Deathstalker rejects, shot in a strange art style.
Right.
It doesn't jibe for me.
No.
But the rotoscoped art, like the traditional animation, I should say, or the close to traditional animation, I like.
It's still it's the Black Cauldron where everything's moving, always.
Yep.
Which is still, that's also like, yeah, everything's moving. Stop moving. Stop moving. Stop moving. Stop moving. When you think of the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings, or the Peter Jackson Fellowship, because this is basically just, it's the Fellowship of the Ring. That's what this movie is.
Yes.
I mean, it has elements of other stories in it, but it's Fellowship of the Ring. I don't want to compare this retelling of Two Towers to Peter Jackson's Two Towers, because pales in comparison.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's just stick with the Fellowship part, because at least that one is pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
So in Peter Jackson's, and we'll get to this when we review the Lord of the Rings. That'll be on our deathbed. That'll be the last ones that we do.
Exactly.
What's the set pieces for Fellowship?
Oh God. All of them? The entire film?
The entire film. Okay.
No, I'm being facetious, but like I'm bouncing back and forth between. There are so many set pieces. There's so many interesting little scenes that stick in my head. And as I said, I haven't seen that movie in 10 years, and it is very. It's still very fresh in my mind. It's still very. Like I'll like you go to the Shire, and then you go to Bree, and then there's the Weathertop fight, and then there's
It's the one that should have won the Academy Award, to be honest. Return of the Ring, Return of the King got the award as a consolation. Like, basically, it was hey, you made this movie, all three, and that's why you got it. the first one
Right.
should have got the award. It's the best one. Like
I,
story.
yeah.
At least in my opinion, like story wise, it's the best one.
Right. I see what you're saying.
Um, my set piece is the Belrog.
Yep.
They got the part of Gandalf pretty good in this Belrog. The
Mm-hmm.
Belrog itself, now that I've seen the, Peter Jackson's version of it,
Mm-hmm.
this is just silly. There's no doom. There's no impending dread with this Belrog, and that's a
Right.
hindrance to this movie too.
Mm-hmm. Is that we're constantly comparing it to something that that we're constantly comparing it to something that was directly inspired by it.
And that's fair, totally fair. But also, this is
And
our
it's just
podcast. We can do what we want to do.
exactly. It's all fucking arbitrary. I don't know. I didn't hate it, and as I said before, it's a fascinating artifact, and there's lots of little strange details, like there's that dumb, really dumb gag or dumb running joke that everyone makes that Frodo and Sam are gay because we are so terrified of male tenderness that they have to be gay. You can't just have friends who are very close and affectionate.
Well, no, if you're affectionate with each other, you have to be boning.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what's it's nice. There's like bits of tenderness between Sam and Frodo that it's different than in the Peter Jackson films. That it doesn't come across as that weird, like, oh, we're still emotionally stunted. It comes across as, they care about each other in a deep way that isn't romantic.
And I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Strider. All the voice actors are good.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like Merry and Pippin's introduction for as integral to the story as they are, because obviously Frodo and Sam, Frodo's the star of the show, right? He's got the ring. He's taking it to Mount Doom. He's going to throw it into Mount Doom, and
Yes.
that's the story. But all of the side characters become so important in not just Peter Jackson, but in the books. And Merry and Pippin are kind of they're just there, and I don't know
Yes.
if they really played up the fellowship as well in this one, and that was what was so important in these movies, is that and so impactful, because and what got me in these movies was these were people that they made a commitment to this mission, but they would die for each other, right? Like
Right.
the Tolkien story was, here's a group of people that when Middle Earth needed heroes, they would get together and save the world together.
Mm-hmm.
And you felt by the end of these, end of the story, that they weren't friends, they were family, right? Like they were bonded together always.
Correct.
You don't get that in this.
No. I think Gimli might have 3 lines in the entire film.
Right. Which again,
And
it's a condensed movie. I understand, and I'm not trying to neg on it, because, like you said, it was surprisingly good. Like like I didn't hate this movie. I was surprised at how much it got right in the story. It just, once you see the other stuff, it's like, oh, this is how that story should have been told.
Yeah. I see how this is done right. Yes.
So
I don't know. It's as I said, it's just the strangest artifact of a film, because it was supposed to be 3 films, and then they condensed it down to 2, and then they condensed it down to 1.
But they didn't even condense it down to one because it doesn't end. He
Yes.
doesn't do anything. Like they don't. Their goal isn't met. The quest isn't met. It's
The
almost
ring isn't destroyed. Yeah.
it's almost like if you're playing. Okay, we've got this 7 hour D&D campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and at hour 3 we decide, all right, that's good. See you later. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, we all committed to the 7 hour one, but okay. Right. So it just and again, I understand like budgetary, constraints and all that kind of stuff, but it is funny because this movie came out closer to when the books were out. Like this
Yes.
is like Frodo Lives showed up on like NYC subway cars. Like it was giant. It
Mm-hmm.
inspired. Um, so Stephen King wrote The Dark Tower, which the movie is. I'm sure we'll talk about that movie at one point because it's kind of a fantasy movie. The movie is so disappointing. Um, but he was reading Tolkien at the same time that he watched The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and it was like, well, why don't we do Good and the Bad?
That. Yeah.
Why don't we do Good and the Bad and the Ugly, but high fantasy?
Right.
And then if you read those books, and it's like, oh, that you can see the seeds of how that got created, right? But then
Right.
those this movie is closer to when the books were really popular, really big,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously they've remained popular, but it's closer to when they were published. Um, it's surprising to me that it just and I wonder also if this is just indicative of what entertainment is now, is that they're always searching for franchises,
Yes.
whereas
Well,
back then
because
they didn't.
right, you can't make something that has. Um, it's not enough to make $1 million. You have to make $1 billion.
That's what I say to myself every morning when I wake up. That's my mantra.
It's not enough that I should succeed. Others should fail.
Well, yeah, totally. But no, I mean overall, it when you suggested this again, it's coming on the heels of I have one more episode left of House of the Dragon. It's been fine.
Mm.
I've wanted to read the Wheel of Time. Have you read
I
them?
read the. I have read the first one. I just prose. It's hard for a variety of reasons. It's hard to read. It's been very hard for me to like sit down and read books lately for the past couple of years. Like right now, I'm going through Casino Royale, which is a very interesting artifact that is super dated.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, that is an interesting interesting book to read. I read these in high school, and I have not picked them up since. And I still have them on my shelf because I remember really like them, and Victoria really likes them. But I haven't had I just haven't had the capacity to reread them.
Hmm.
And that's the same thing with Wheel of Time. I read the first book. It was interesting. I would like to read the other ones. There are 13 more of them, and they're plotting.
Oh,
There's a
and
later.
you could use all of them to build a house.
Mm-hmm.
They could be cornerstones in your house. They're
There is a
they're
later book
bricks.
from what I understand. There's a later book in the series where the main character is climbing up a ladder, and each page is a single rung of the ladder.
Why the fuck do I want to read that? See, it gets to that point where I am much more of a sci-fi guy. I like looking ahead,
Mm-hmm.
which my big recommendation for you, if you're looking for a good read, Sea of Tranquility. It's
Okay.
by Emily Saint. She wrote Station 11, which is it's an HBO miniseries or limited series or
Emily
whatever.
St. John Mandel.
Yep. Um, Sea of Tranquility is like different points in time. It's kind of like a nesting doll book. It's kind of like Cloud Atlas, but it's actually
Cool.
it's more connected than Cloud Atlas. Um,
Okay.
it's short and sweet and wonderful. I loved it. It's probably the best book I read this
Cool.
year. I
Nice.
am much more like forward facing, which is sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Fantasy is our myths and our stories
Right.
that we told ourselves.
Roughly. Yeah.
Uh, if you had
Yeah.
to like describe the difference, that is the
Mm-hmm.
one way to describe the difference. That's not a bad thing or good thing. It's just that's the way it is. I don't know. I try. I've read the Tolkien books. The first, the Lord of the Rings. I love the Hobbit book. I like them better than the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I like the Hobbit, the novel, better than the Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
I listened to Tolkien as well. I listened to the three books when I was traveling for work a lot, and it's just so many fucking songs.
I've never. I see. You and Dad have said the same thing, and I've heard that for years. And I've never had a problem with the songs.
I just
Now, I will also confess he's not a good songwriter.
he's not Taylor Swift
No, he's not Taylor
because
Swift.
Taylor Tay is just she tugs at
Look,
your
there's two
heartstrings.
kinds. Yeah, there's two kinds of people in the world: people who like Taylor Swift and liars.
Episode title. That's amazing. Yeah, I just it what I loved about the Peter Jackson books, and actually what I liked about this animated movie was that it picked a through line.
Mm-hmm.
It picked a story to tell because you could go in many different directions if you're reading Lord of the Rings and trying to tell a story. And these folks told a story within it that still, you know, meets up with the general like thrust, but also it makes it kind of streamlined. Um, One thing I didn't mention, and this is completely off topic, but it's Halloween. The opening battle, so they both open the same way.
Mm-hmm.
We're to tell you about the rings.
Which is a good choice, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
You have to establish why.
Here's the rings. So in Peter Jackson, here's the rings, and it's this epic battle, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
crazy, I was there 1,000 years ago when they were, and I chopped off Sauron's hand, and I took the ring, and Isildur followed me, but he kept the ring to himself. It's very gritty and gross and realistic and battle-y.
Mm-hmm.
What they do with this is very like representative and very kind of artsy, but you get what's
It's
going on. And
mm-hmm.
I liked it a lot, and I liked it a lot because it reminded me of the beginning of Bram Stoker's Dracula
Yes, it does.
with the
Yep.
I mean even the like red background of the sky and almost like the paper cutouts of people fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it's a story being told to you, which is what
Yes.
this kind of story needs. Like this is a legend. Like we're telling you the legend of the Lord of the Rings. So that kind of beginning, like all the way through to when they show Smeagol getting the ring, and they kind of catch you up the most important part of the Hobbit, where not Frodo, Bilbo,
Bilbo.
Bilbo finds the ring. That whole part, I just recently rewatched Bram Stoker's Dracula because it's Halloween, and I saw
Because
that.
it's incredible.
It's whew, that's a whole other thing that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of that opening of describing how Dracula got to be Dracula. Describes how Frodo gets the ring. I get it. Cool. This was a nice beginning. Lucas, where does this fall?
That's what I'm looking at the list right now because I'm trying to figure that out. It's solidly middle of the pack.
It's solidly Middle Earth.
So, here's my thought. It's better than Twilight.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I think I would rather watch Bulletproof Monk, though.
On rewatch, yes.
Cool. So that puts it at 46.
Okay.
Cool.
Wonderful. Lucas, where can folks find us?
We can be found at Sword in Boardcast on Twitter and Instagram. We can be found at swordandboard.podbean.com, also on Stitcher and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and basically any streaming service you have. If there's anything else that you would like, if there's a service some obscure service that I don't know about, send us a line. We will fix it for you and try and get us on there. Our theme music, Goblin Road Trip, is produced by the incredible Lillian Boyd. You can find her at Here Lies Lil on Twitter.
Our artwork is done by the wonderful Wes Forbes, and the Menders are playing shows all throughout the Charlotte and Gastonia area this winter. Had a bit of bad news. His pup of many years passed away yesterday, so send him good thoughts. And we will return, we promise, with better movie recommendations and a better attention to doing this more regularly.
Yes.
Have a good one, y'all.